Chapter 8. The Doctrine's Reach. The Doctrine's word had spread faster than she had imagined. At first it was whispers among the wanderers, doubts muttered over the fire, but soon rumors slipped beyond their camp, carried on tongues of traders and travelers who drifted between the hidden paths. The settlement had named her a fugitive, her defiance in the chapel, her silence before the elders, her escape from the binding house, all had been twisted into a story of betrayal. She was no longer only her, she was a query. The wanderers grew restless. Their lives had always been lived in the shadows of the doctrine, but now the shadow reached deeper. When scouts returned with news of search parties combing through the borderlands, the camp erupted into argument. Some insisted she be cast out, left to face her fate alone. Others argued she only could not be abandoned. To surrender would be the best. She would have to bow to the very fear that she had fled. Her presence had become both a beacon and a burden. She felt the weight of their suspicion in every glance, at every moment. Mothers pulled children close when she passed by, then fell silent when she approached the fire. The boy with the dog no longer laughed so freely. Even the silver-haired leader who had once defended her flame grew defiant and distant. "You are hunted now," the woman said quietly one evening, "and the hunted bring hunterers." Fear was not new to her, but guilt was. She had never asked for the wanderer's protection, yet she saw how her presence cracked their fragile peace. At night, she lay awake listening to the shifting camp, to whispered debates of whether she should leave or not. She pressed her scarred palm to her chest and wondered if freedom always demanded a cost. Was it her protection or theirs? The doctrine's reach was not only through hunters, it lived in memory and habits, too deep in the unlearned or to unlearn. Some of the wanderers still bowed their heads at dawn, murmuring fragments of prayers they claimed to have abandoned. She scoffed when she saw those. Maybe it wasn't the hunters coming after them. Maybe it was just their past. She could hear echoes aloud. Others still feared to speak names aloud, as though the matrons might hear. She recognized the same chain she carried, invisible but unbroken. The settlement had stretched itself into their very bones. One night proof arrived. Flames tore through the trees at the edge of the camp, torches carried by settlement guards. Their shouts split the night. "Return what is ours!" Panic rippled through the wanderers. Children screamed, tents collapsed in frantic hands, possessions were abandoned. Her froze at the sight, guilt rooting her to the earth like a pillar of foundation. They had come for her, always for her. But something shifted in that moment. Instead of surrender, she ran toward the fire. She seized the branch from the ground, its end still smoldering, from the campfire, and brandished it like a blade. Fear thundered in her chest, but the vow that had carried her this far roared loud. "I will not break. If they want her, she would not go quietly in the night. She would not be bound again." The wanderers saw her stand, and something in them ignited. The man with the instrument swung it like a club this time, and the boy with the dog threw the stones. The silver-haired woman shouted orders that cut through panic to the rest of the wanderers. For the first time, defiance rose, not in whispers, but in flames. They drove the hunters back, not by weapons sharper than doctrine, but by themselves. Fury sharper than fear. When dawn broke, smoke clung to the camp and fear lingered in their eyes. But so did something else. Respect. Ability. They had done it. She had not brought them danger. She had brought them proof. In fact, the doctrine had been faced with defiance. And at that moment, the silver-haired woman's mourning echoed still. Their reach does not end. Not yesterday. Not tomorrow. Not ever. It will follow you, it will follow us now. Her journey with the Wanderers had given her a kinship, but it had also given her a new weight to carry. The doctrine's shadow stretched farther than she had dreamed, and it was coming for them all now. In the gray hours before dawn, they hid their fires beneath kettles and shielded embers with damp earth, a trick that elders said could fool even the keenest scout. Smoke starved off the air and thinned to a ghost, and the wind carried it away without leaving a trail. She learned the shapes of silence, the tense quiet before a bird takes flight, the false hush that follows a snapped twig, the heavy pause in the story when someone decides what may be spoken aloud. Silence, she realized, was not emptiness, but language. When strangers approached the trade road, the wanderers became ordinary. Farmers by posture, petitioners by tone. Only their eyes betrayed them. Bright with the knowledge of what would not be named, she studied these transformations the way she studied once the scripture back at the binding house. The silver-haired woman taught her to mend canvas with tight, invisible stitches, explaining that a seam's strength lay not in thickness but in patience. The word was hers, she said, guiding her hand. We learned to hold it together without showing the strain. Sometimes they packed camp in complete darkness, hands moving by memory, by twilight. Stakes slid free. Ropes coiled, the youngest passed, followed cloth to the elders. Speed was a virtue, but quiet was a commandment. Even the dogs learned to work without a bark. On the ridge beyond the stream, the saw stones set upright like teeth, a marker that the wanderers called an old border. No one agreed what it was once divided. Perhaps it was a split village of gods. Now it divided fear from the resolve, and they crossed it without ceremony. Her began keeping a private ledger in her mind. Water, food, distance, weather, rumor. She recited it each night until the words steadied like prayer. The ledger did not beg or praise, it measured, and the numbers made courage feel almost rational. They traded for salt with a woman who wore a necklace of keys, each key unmatched and rusted, though. The woman claimed they both opened doors that no longer existed. Her paid in thread and story, and for a moment they were both richer. A boy taught her to read the grass, the way it leaned after a body's passage, the way it quivered when something watched from the hollow. He did not speak much, but when he did speak, he named small things with care as if precision itself were protection. If he did not vanish, it learned new manners. It was no longer shouted in her head. It tapped her shoulder, pointed and waited while she decided to learn. This made her slower, but it also made her freer and pay attention more. On a storm day, the sky came down in sheets, and the camp huddled beneath and learned about the possibility to hold. And so it did. They laughed together, not because danger had passed, but because they had stood together and found the future still inside the rain. She carried a strip of cloth, taken from the binding house, the only thing she had not thrown away. Sometimes she gripped it until her knuckles whitened, then tucked it away back into her sleeve. A reminder it's not a shackle. She told herself it is a seed of defiance. One evening, as the wanderers broke camp beneath the blood-red sky, she stood apart on the ridge, smoke curled upward from the extinguished embers vanishing into the dark. For a moment, she felt the weight of all the eyes that haunted her. Some filled with hatred, others filled with fear, perhaps even some with envy. She pressed the stripe of cloth from the binding house between her fingers. Once it had marked her captivity, now it marked her vow. She whispered into the wind, so softly, only the earth could hear. If their reach is endless, then so must be my fire. When she turned back, the wanderers were waiting, their faces lit by last threads of sun. They would walk beside her for now. The Doctrine's reach had found them, but so had defiance. And as night descended, she stepped forward, knowing this war was no longer hers alone.